Folks, this is an incredible place. It's an epic story that still haunts the American consciousness even today, 136 years after the battle. Hundreds of thousands of people come here from all over the world to take this in, from every corner of the world. It's the only battlefield in the country, and one of only a couple in the whole world, where markers indicate where soldiers fell on the field and were buried. Brown markers indicate where warriors fell. There's one in the mouth of this trail right here behind those people. You probably can't see it, they're burning away. 19 of those markers across the battlefield. 263 soldiers killed here on June 25th and 26th, 1876. Between 60 and 100 warriors killed. We're not sure, maybe more. Soldiers buried on the field, disinterred 5 years later, scraped up off the battlefield what was left of them. A mass grave dug on top of the hill. 220 soldiers lie beneath that memorial today. Custer perished on the ridge, buried 18-inch grave with his brother Tom. Disinterred a year later, what was left to him, not much. Taken back east and buried at West Point, where he rests today with his wife Elizabeth. Thousands of books written about this battle. It's the most, I would say, controversial piece of American history, militarily speaking, that there is. Behind us, a national cemetery. 5,000 veterans and their families, unrelated to the battle. From the Indian War period all the way up through Vietnam, closed in the late 1970s. Full to capacity today. Across the street from Last Stand Hill, the Indian Memorial, dedicated in 2003 to the warriors and tribes who fought here in a desperate attempt to hang on to their very way of life and their existence. It's a spiritual place. You can feel it. Apocalyptic, chaotic battle. Now there's silence. I live on the battlefield. Sometimes I've walked up to Last Stand Hill at 11 o'clock at night when the moon is full. You can feel it. By the end of this talk today, if you can't feel it, I'm going to suggest that you already may be dead. Became known as Custer's Last Stand, but in reality, it was really the last stand of a way of life. Because after this fight, it was downhill all the way for the Sioux and the Cheyenne. A year later, you were either on a reservation in Canada or dead. Became known as Custer's Last Stand. It was every bit as shocking as 9/11 was in our time, as Pearl Harbor was in some of our parents' time. How did it happen? How did it happen? Why did it happen? It's ultimately a culminating event because it marks nearly 400 years of cultural animosity, cultural friction, cultural disdain between Euro-Americans and Native Americans. And the fight was always over the same thing. Land. Land. Who would occupy it, how it would be used, and who would be allowed to traverse across it. Because when Euro-Americans come out west, they see huge expanses of territory. And they see grass, and water, and timber, and minerals in the ground, particularly that yellow metal. Makes a white man go crazy. And when they see all these resources, they envision farms, towns, ranches, railroads, telegraphs, and barbed wire fences. All of it driven by a new religion called manifest destiny. The belief that somehow Euro-Americans are sanctioned, they're ordained by God to spread across the continent, conquer it, subdue it, tame it, from coast to coast, and from sea to shining sea. There's just one problem with that, though. There's people already here. And they have their own vision of what life should be like. And I would argue this, But they were the freest people on earth because when they got horses in the early 1600s, they could go from Mexico to Canada in pursuit of huge herds of buffalo. The oftentimes 1,500-pound super walking Walmart store of the plains. Food, shelter, clothing, weapons, utensils, fuel, medicines, and a whole lot more. By the way, folks, a shocking statistic. In 1840, there's 60 million buffalo on the plains. And by 1890, less than 500 left on the earth. Euro-Americans come out west, they want to turn the Sioux and the Cheyenne and the Arapaho and the Blackfoot and the Crow. They want to turn them into Christian farmers. Well, Sitting Bull's not about to bend over and scratch and claw at the ground with a hoe to try to make a living. And Crazy Horse is not going to surrender his war pony and hook it up to a plow. They're hunters and they're warriors. And that's who they are. Did I tell you guys I was a retired teacher? I'm a retired teacher, 30 years in public education. I was a history teacher, a guidance counselor, physical education instructor, football coach for 30 years. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you I had a career in education, but I'm still teaching. But here's my point, I want to take you back in time. Everybody here is a junior in high school now. What's happened in U.S. history in this country economically in the early 1870s? What's going on? What's happened? Depression. Panic of 1872 following the Civil War. We're broke. Treasuries broke. Banks are failing. Stock market crashes. There's massive unemployment, 20%. People are spending their life savings. It's a very insecure time. Does that ring a bell?
Like now?
We're still broke. Back then, the same concept. We need an economic stimulus package. George Custer's going to find it in the Black Hills. Gold in the summer of 1874. They said all you had to do was walk through the grass and pick up nuggets off the tops of your shoes, Jackie. Nuggets off the tops of your shoes. Miners, prospectors, entrepreneurs pour into the Black Hills. 10,000 in a town called Deadwood overnight. All of them illegal aliens. Not supposed to be there. Because you see the Black Hills, Paha Sapa, the sacred Black Hills, promised to the Sioux, guaranteed by a white man's treaty of 1868. Calamity Jane, Deadwood, illegal alien. Wild Bill Hickok, Deadwood, illegal alien. Not supposed to be there. Well, President Grant, he is on the horns of a dilemma because he's got all kinds of pressure. Stimulate the economy, create jobs, open up the West, put money in the treasury. There's gold in the Black Hills. What am I going to do? Well, I got this promise I made. But these people are just wasting the land. They're not farming. Let's buy the Black Hills. We'll offer $7 million. A lot of money. But charismatic war leader Chief Sitting Bull and others, no, not for sale. You don't sell the ground that your ancestors walked on and now their bones lie beneath. Not for sale. Well, how about if we lease them? We'll give them back when we're done. Folks, you paying attention to the British Petroleum deal down in the Gulf? We'll give them back when we're done. No thanks. Problem is handed over to the War Department. Grant, in frustration, turns to two old comrades of his, William Tecumseh Sherman and Phil Sheridan. Together, those two boys burned down half the South. The war between the states. Anybody from the South here? Yep. I guarantee you there's no Sherman Elementary Schools in Atlanta.
No.
They know what total war is, and they're going to try to wage it once again on the northern plains. They're going to issue an ultimatum to the Sioux. It's pretty much straightforward. Get out of the Black Hills. Get out of the Powder River country. Get out of the Rosebud country and go back to your respective reservations and stay there. And do so by January 31st, 1876, because if you don't, you're going to be considered hostile and the Army will come and get you and force you to return. Runners are sent out to inform the villages of this edict, but it's a bitter winter, the winter of 75 and 76. Howling winds, drifting snow, 40 below zero, not uncommon on the northern plains. You cannot move a village. There's no grass for the ponies. But more commanding than the weather itself is the Council of Sitting Bull, who says to the people, don't go back to the reservation. Don't make yourself a slave to a piece of fat bacon, some coffee, and sugar. Stay out. Live like a real Indian before it's too late. He knew the sun was going down. And so they stayed out. They didn't go back. And by the early spring, those who were on the agencies began to trickle off and reinforce Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse out here, folks. And by early summer, they're pouring off the agencies. So much so that by the afternoon of this fight, there's a village down in the river valley bottom where that big growth of trees is, to the south of us. It juts out about half of a mile from the river. That village is nearly 2 miles in length. 8,000 people, 2,000 warriors. They're not going to go back. Phil Sheridan inherits the problem. Phil Sheridan's about this big. He's a sawed-off bulldog. He's tougher than a boot. His head is even shaped like a bullet. He's got no neck. He likes to fight. And if you're interested in ethnic history, not to step on anybody's toes, but I'll tell you what, he's Irish. Anybody Irish here?
Yes.
No offense. No offense. He likes to fight. He's going to bring 3 military columns into this field out of the south, Wyoming. Fort Fetterman. General George Crook is going to come out of Wyoming territory with 1,300 soldiers, 260 soldiers scouts jacking, 1,300 soldiers. Crook's a famed Apache fighter. Out of the west, Fort Ellis, Montana territory, Colonel John Gibbon is going to come down the Yellowstone with 450 soldiers. Gibbon stopped Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. He walks with a severe limp. His Crow scouts call him No Hip. And out of the east, Fort Abraham Lincoln, 1,000 soldiers under the direct command of General Alfred Terry. Second in command, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, all 12 companies of the 7th Cavalry.